Hello everybody, my name is Boulevard and welcome to the Legends of Runeterra Deck Masters Tournament. I wanted to quickly touch on the format that we're going to be playing in here as it's pretty different from what we see in the West and in Korea even. So each player has brought 5 different decks with each region being allowed to overlap one time. It is still a conquest style no ban best of 5, so you must pick up a win with any 3 of your decks, but unlike other tournaments, once you play a deck, you're not allowed to play it anymore regardless of whether you win or lose. All right, we've got our last quarterfinals match, SDARO versus Shanghai. One of these players will be moving on to the semifinals. Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Boulevard. Going to be rounding out this weekend of action with you guys. Pretty excited here. I don't think I've actually casted Pilfer versus Bald Eagle before, so this is going to be a new one for me. I'm not sure which one's favored in this matchup. I'm inclined to say Bald Eagle just because SDARO's deck is going to play sort of like a Bannerman deck, and the board-centric decks are kind of what Shanghai's Bald Eagle is looking to prey on. And, you know, here we see it from the get-go. This Jagged Butcher with the Pilfer, or the Plunder, rather. God, now I'm getting the P words mixed up. Not actually going to work out as he does have the answers in this Hapless Aristocrat into the Avarosan Sentry. And the one of Pilfered Goods, SDARO still running that Pilfered Goods, as these deck lists were locked in a couple of weeks ago. If you're wondering why Shanghai is running this Bald Eagle, this tournament was started sort of at the peak of Bald Eagle that has since sort of hard fallen off throughout at least the West. You know, I'm not actually sure what the current Korean meta is looking like, but this is sort of a relic of the past. And by the past, I just mean a short 11 days ago. Time sure flies here in Runeterra. Now we're going to see the trade from the Sentry onto the Jagged Butcher. SDARO might think he got the better of this one, not actually having to risk his 3-attack Butcher, but it's really not going to matter. We're going to see Misfortune come down as sort of an option to clean up this Hapless Aristocrat. The box just 1 mana shy of coming down. And Shanghai doesn't necessarily have to block this. He can just save this Spiderling for the Withering Wail after he Grasp of the Undyings this Misfortune on the following turn. Even if you go for, or Vengeance the Misfortune if you're really that afraid of Fury of the North. The Vengeance, you know, that does open you up for Grasp on turn 5. You know, Vengeance on 4, Grasp on 5. It's a pretty clean curve, but he's going to throw this out in front of the Misfortune anyway. Save himself that little bit of health. And SDARO, you know, his turns are pretty cut and dry for him here on out. Things are a little bit out of his hands. He's just only got that 1 unit left available to him. Probably going to see a Warning Shot into the Pilfered Goods on the turn after. Could even see a Warning Shot fired off here just to get the Sejuani ticked up, but I don't think Sejuani is sort of the win condition that you're looking to play for in a matchup like this. The Anivia really doesn't care if she has attack or not. It's really just the ability of multiple Anivias decimating your entire board that they're looking to get off, which is why I would say that the Bald Eagle is favored in a matchup like this. The Pilfer deck is still sort of a tempo-heavy, board-centric kind of deck, especially since we saw that nerf onto Pilfered Goods. It looks like he was even just considering firing off the Warning Shot into the Pilfered Goods. I don't think there's anything in Shanghai's deck that could protect that. You know, you could go for, yeah, Glimpse Beyond actually is exactly what I was thinking of, is sort of the one answer that you did have to prevent the life gain on the side of your opponent. But this still represents the 3 damage that you would have saved anyway because you got down this Yordle Grifter while the box was unavailable. And neither of these is a particularly enticing Vengeance target, so Shanghai not even going to put that one on the table. It does have the option for the Ruination on the following turn. Hapless Aristocrat and Vile Feast picked up. Really, the big card that SDARO is looking to steal here is that one of Harrowing that we see out of so many of these Bald Eagle decks. I didn't actually get a chance to take a close look at Shanghai's list and see if there was multiple copies, but 1 Harrowing is sort of the standard for Bald Eagle, or at least was at the time that these deck lists were submitted. Nowadays, we're really just not seeing Bald Eagle in any capacity, so I guess the standard is 0. SDARO starting to kind of come back into this one. The NAB package, rather, sort of working out for him. I forgot that we have an official word for it now that I should be calling it in NAB. I'm still kind of stuck on Pilfer. I was never a big fan of Yoink. That one just felt a little bit weird to me. It feels more like a sound effect, and I guess that was kind of the point, but I don't know. I was never big on the Yoink. I always called it Pilfer. I gotta find a new deck name for this MF Sejuani, because Pilfer really is outdated now, and NAB just, I don't know, it feels too short. You know, let me know what you guys think, because I am kind of curious. I want to use the terminology that people like to hear, kind of regardless of how I feel about it. If Pilfer or Yoink is still sort of what everybody wants to hear, then, you know, I'll try and adjust Yoink into my vocabulary. But we could see Shanghai falling down to 6 here. It's pretty unlikely as he does have the Grasp of the Undyings available to him. We're not seeing a copy of Fury of the North out of SDARO, so doesn't have the punish for going for the Grasp. And I think that's what Shanghai's sort of debating here is, do I have to fire off a Vengeance and respect this potential for a Fury of the North, or am I safe to throw out a Grasp of the Undying? Of course, with perfect information, we do know that the Grasp is safe. We're going to see the Glimpse Beyond to deny the healing at least, and that does mean that Shanghai will be falling down to 9. Looks like SDARO is counting out his hand to ensure that he's not going to overdraw on this Glimpse Beyond, and then does have the opportunity to play a couple of cards out a little bit later on. You know, sort of after these draws have come out. Omen Hawk, not a terrible pickup. Island Navigator, you know, nothing to write home about, but not necessarily bad pickups. I am curious to see what he's going to run out here, though, as Shanghai does still have this box available to him. If we see... Okay, I was about to say, if we see the Island Navigator, and actually a card burned by SDARO, you know, counting up his hand, probably should have fired off a warning shot there, as he does have 3 copies of that card now, and I didn't quite get a great look at what was burned off the bottom of Shanghai's deck. The Omen Hawk gonna come out, and I guess this is about as good as your box gets. It's not unlikely for SDARO to just pass here and float that 3 mana into the Riptide Rex turn. And I think that without developing an Anivia or really getting any impactful board wipes down, like this Jagged Butcher has lived from turn 1 up until now, Shanghai might have played this one a little bit too patiently and could just die to the Riptide Rex on this next turn. If we see, like, even if we see a Ruination out of Shanghai here, then Warning Shot Riptide Rex represents 8 damage, and then another Warning Shot is just lethal. That's something that Shanghai has to consider. You know, you think of Warning Shot sort of as an activator for the Plunder effects. You don't always think of it as what it is in a 1 damage burst spell. So Shanghai currently kind of just playing the game at 6, and yeah, this should put him at 3. So going to be 1 shy of the Warning Shots actually killing him this turn. This Withering Wail doesn't clean a whole lot up. We might even just see a box here to put the Riptide Rex in the Withering Wail range on the following turn. And this Agnivia is not even going to evolve back into Anivia next turn. Things are looking pretty rough for Shanghai here in game number 1 in what I thought would be a favored matchup, but just not really able to line up the, you know, the removal onto the units of SDARO. Yeah, we do see the box. That's going to set up pretty nicely for the Withering Wail, but we actually are just going to see a Make It Rain. Going to put him down to 2 HP, and that does mean that the Warning Shots are going to kill him. That was actually something that I had missed. I had forgot about the Make It Rains. I was so focused on these Warning Shots and making sure I remember that I forgot about that. But that's just going to be SDARO picking up game number 1.
스다로의 다로잉 샹하이의 미포루시안 대결입니다. 야, 1코 선공에 1코 잡는 거 좀 중요하거든요. 사실 저는
Game number 2, we're going to have SDARO switching over to the Darius Harrowing, and on the side of Shanghai, we're going to be picking up that Lucian Misfortune Bannerman deck. I almost called it Scouts, but I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but in my head, Scouts sort of indicates the Bilgewater heavier version of this deck that we're really not seeing anymore. And then Misfortune Bannerman, of course, is the version that runs the Vanguard Bannerman. SDARO sticking it out with the boogeyman of the format, the Darius Harrowing, and both these players kind of have their ideal openers. They're a little bit shy of something they would have wanted. You know, SDARO would like a Crimson Disciple, Shanghai would like a Fleet Feather Tracker, but beggars can't be choosers, and they've got pretty good curves from here on out anyway. This is about as close as a 50-50 as the Darius Harrowing gets on a matchup. Shanghai does have the capabilities to out-aggro him. There's not a lot of super effective blockers in SDARO's deck. Basilisk Rider is sort of the boogeyman of this matchup. That 4 health breakpoint as well as the 6 attack overwhelm is just a little bit too much for anything Shanghai is going to have available. And we do see 2 copies in his hand, so things looking pretty good for SDARO, as well as that Harrowing to bring it all back and do it again. He is not going to have the attack token on 6, however, but that does just sort of give him 1 more turn to get those Basilisk Riders into the death pool, get a lot of trade value out of them, and then still push through lethal with them. And SDARO, I had mentioned earlier, not finding that Crimson Disciple. Now with the Demolitionist, feels even worse, not being able to find that card. And Shanghai has, you know, the Solution attack is free. that just is what it is. The quick attack, the very powerful game mechanic we saw a little bit earlier in the top 8. Zed Lucian was doing a lot of work because it is just sort of the inherent protection that your aggro units get to them. And with the spinning axe on the side, well, not even the spinning axe on the side of SDARO, it was just the Draven on the side of SDARO that sort of staves off Shanghai's Misfortune attack, and now he gets down the Basilisk Rider. Things looking a little bit scary for Shanghai. Can kill this Rider with the Riposte if he really wants to, or can Bannerman and block it with either the Misfortune or the Lucian. I think this deck has 3 Misfortune and 2 Petty Officers, the only Bilgewater card, so there are only 2 misses left in the deck. 1 Misfortune and 1 Petty Officer left in there, so this Bannerman pretty likely to resolve. And we've seen games completely change their course off of missed allegiances. Not going to be the case here. Both players hitting their turn 4 allegiances. We're just going to see a full suite of attacks out of SDARO. Shanghai has the option to line up a value trade with this Misfortune onto one of these 2-1s. Could also line up the Lucian onto one of them. Actually has a lot of value trades onto the 2-1s. A little surprised to see the Precious Pet come out, but I don't think SDARO really cares. He understands that if you're going for value trades, that means I'm pushing through more damage. I have this Spinning Axe available to me to kill the Lucian or the Bannerman. You have to block with the Misfortune if you want your unit to survive that interaction. And Misfortune, sort of the healthiest blocker for this Basilisk Rider, if that's the route we want to go. So we're going to line up these blocks and lock them in. Does mean that the Spinning Axe is available to trade onto the Bannerman, though I'm not loving any of the discards that SDARO has available for him in that situation. He's got a good setup for lethal over the next couple of turns, running out a second Basilisk Rider, and then the decisive maneuver on 6 will just be lethal. As you stun whatever is blocking the Rider, the buff comes out, it becomes an 8/4 that goes through at your opponent uncontested, deals the 8 damage. Single combat sort of the only punish for something along those lines. So SDARO going to keep the play in mind, but is going to respect it. And the Crimson Disciple could change the course of things here. Disciple does represent your opponent going down to 4 HP with this Imperial Demolitionist. And the Misfortune attack does represent another 2 damage if you want to throw out the block with this Crimson unit. It looks like that is the play that SDARO is going to want to go for. Has sort of his pick here. Do I want to play this and the Demolitionist? Do I want to play that Basilisk Rider and go for that juicy decisive maneuver lethal? Looks like he has decided to go for this Disciple play. Both of these plays kind of weak to single combat, though I think this one, you know, works out a little bit better for the single combat. You do develop a few more units. You might not kill something on your opponent's side with the single combat, but we don't see the single combat out of Shanghai anyway, so I'm kind of going to move on from that point. You do probably still have lethal. You know, if you push your opponent down to 4 and just play the Basilisk Rider and attack with 2 Spinning Axes in hand, this decisive maneuver isn't necessarily something that has to come out next turn. And he actually will have the mana of it, or I think he'll be 1 shy of it. I think he needs to float all 3 spell mana to have Rider and decisive maneuver on the following turn. So Demolitionist will sort of tap him below that capability. But I think if you're going to play the Disciple, you're going to play the Demolitionist as well. Maybe you are just trying to dissuade any attacks out of your opponent by saying, you know, if you want to attack, this Disciple is going to deal 2 to you. The Disciple is still going to deal 2 to you through the Misfortune ability. Now you're going to fall down to 2, and 2 is a terrifying place to be. 4 is a scary place to be. 2 is terrifying. That means that all of a sudden you're dead to a Transfusion and any block if this Disciple doesn't die. Of course, it will die because it is throwing out a block in order to get you down to the 2, but Legion Grenadier opens up as an option. Noxian Fervor opens up as an option. And it looks like Shanghai going to decide that this is fine. You know, there's really nothing they could do about it. The question now is, do you attack with everything? You do have a safe attack. The Fleet Feather Tracker can attack anything other than this Disciple here, and you will stay at 4 HP. But I think that's sort of a not losing play. It always looks weird when you have to go for these winning plays that, with perfect information, we know isn't going to work out, but it is just sort of the best play in the moment. Because if you don't attack this turn, you know, you're sitting at 4 HP, your opponent still has this 2 health Disciple, they still have a lot of Spinning Axes, there's a lot of Overwhelm units that they could play on the next turn, but, you know, you're going into the Darius turn. So that's really what has to be on Shanghai's mind here, and just understands that he needs to push through as much damage as possible if he's going to find some way to survive the next turn. Needs to have lethal on turn 7 if he's going to have any chance in the game. Can't respect that 2 damage too much and lose the game because of it. But that said, I do think SDARO just has this one in the bag. We don't see an answer for the Basilisk Rider. Well, Genevieve is an answer for the Basilisk Rider. We don't see an answer for Basilisk Rider triple spinning axe. And there will be 3 other cards in hand besides the axes after we see the draw out of SDARO for the turn. So that is, you know, basically a Darius. It says discard your entire hand and have 1 less attack, but that is basically a Darius coming out of SDARO there in the form of that Basilisk Rider. It's definitely going to be able to deal the 2 damage. And that should be SDARO picking this one up next turn unless we see a bonkers top deck out of Shanghai. I think it would have to be pretty much exactly single combat, and even then, I don't love his chances. Demolitionist actually does just represent lethal, because you need a single combat to deal with both this this Basilisk Rider as well as the Demolitionist. So, gonna get started with the Rider. Can just attack with the Rider here, and then Demolitionist the Demolitionist. And Shanghai, if he wants to live, does have to play this Genevieve. Needs a 5 health unit in order to survive this one, and does have it. Can block with the Genevieve or Misfortune, though with this Demolitionist and the spinning axes in general really doesn't matter. SDARO has lethal, 6 ways to Sunday. How do you want to chop it up? What day of the week are we going for? It's looking like a Tuesday victory to me. If you're wondering what the hell I just said, I'm not really sure either. We're just going to take that one as it is. It's the end of the game. You should have skipped past this part anyway. You know, you don't need to see the lethal happen. Do you need to see the Nexus hit 0? Did you need to know how he did it? Well, now you know. It was a spinning axe discarding a spinning axe. It wasn't the Demolitionist. Congratulations. Welcome to Tuesdays at Maury's. That's SDARO. Moving on 2-0. We are at match point for SDARO here in game number 3 of this Riot Korea and OGN Deck Masters tournament. And SDARO, I had mentioned in the last set, Pegasus versus Voodoo, sort of talked a lot about the Kinku elusive versus old Bannerman matchup, and how that was typically very elusive favored because of the way the challengers were coming out, and now the Demacia decks are a lot more aggressive, so the nature of the matchup has changed. They do have a lot more agency in the matchup, they do have a lot more windows to win, but here we're actually seeing SDARO make a return to the Bannerman deck of old with that 3 Garen, 3 Fiora. We do see Ionia in the deck, but it's just a couple of copies of Deny, and I think it was Will of Ionia? I saw one other Ionia spell in there. I do know that there are Denies in the deck, but, you know, no Zed, no Ionia units, no Shen, nothing like that. So yeah, SDARO actually just bringing a very traditional Bannerman deck that we really haven't seen for quite some time. Garen is still a very powerful champion, but it's been quite some time since we saw him, and while Shanghai's got a bit of a slow start, does have a, you know, pretty strong hand available to him. If he really wants to, could run out the Zed here and commit the Elixir of Iron, has the capability of running out this Inspiring Mentor as well. If Shanghai passes if Shanghai passes, I don't think SDARO's necessarily going to take the pass. I think that 8 damage is a lot to miss out on turn 3, just to sort of deny your opponent from playing 1 unit. But I also, you know, maybe Shanghai is considering the capabilities of like, okay, well, you know, if I do play my Zed in the Elixir of Iron, like, sure, you get the Elixir of Iron out of me, sure, my Zed's down to 1 HP, but it does mean that your Fiora at least didn't hit me in the face and I can maintain a bit of a higher life total. But it's not going to be the case in SDARO. I think it's very correct to push this much damage on your opponent. You know, this 8 damage to save, or 3 damage to save an Elixir of Iron. We'll have to kind of track how that one works out for him. And unlike the Pegasus versus Voodoo matchup, we are seeing Fury of the Norths out of the Ionia elusive player. I was going to say the Ionia player, but they're both playing Ionia. Just because SDARO's deck is so old school Bannerman, I kind of forgot he was running Ionia. And I don't think the Ionia cards that he is running are really going to come up in a matchup like this. So far, Shanghai, you know, behind on board and on life, but he does have the Braum now. And one of the big things that Braum had going for it, even before the buffs, was that it was a phenomenal anti-Bannerman tool. The reason that we didn't see it too often is because it was really just an anti-Bannerman tool. We didn't see it really used as anything else, and there weren't a whole lot of decks that could actually run it. Ash Sejuani was definitely just the best regional combination for Frostbite control. It was also a deck that just kind of beat Bannerman anyway. There weren't really any Freljord decks that were struggling with Bannerman that had a good spread of other matchups that could afford to run the Braum. Here we're just going to see single combat attempt to take out the Zed, though we do know that is not going to work, as there is Elixir of Iron on the side of Shanghai, who's actually going to get to level the Zed, which doesn't actually mean much in terms of the toughness available to it. That 2 health versus 3 health, not going to make too much of a difference. Given the current board state, you know, Fiora is still going to have that 3 attack to hit into that. And overall, the life total's a little bit closer to even, though still definitely favored for SDARO, who does have another play to run out if they really want to. Can throw down this Brightsteel Protector, but now with the Braum on the side of Shanghai, things are just really awkward for SDARO. You know, Garen is sort of one of the quote-unquote free attack that you have next turn because it does just line its attack into all of your opponent's defenses beautifully. The problem for SDARO is that we do see that Fury of the North out of Shanghai, so that play not going to work out. And that's almost a snap concede. If you play Garen and you attack it into your opponent's board and a 5/9 Braum just slaps that back down into the ground and gets a Mighty Poro, I think that in 80% of the situations, you just concede on the spot. That is not something that you're able to handle. We could see the Garen held back, not playing into the Fury of the North, and going for a Judgment play on the following turn, as we don't actually see many elusives out of Shanghai. But we do have the Will of Ionia to actually shut that play down as well. So SDARO kind of with his back against the wall, which is how we typically saw Bannerman versus elusive matches playing out way back in the day. It was pretty heavily elusive favored. If you guys want to fight about that, we can, but I'm right. And I have... The numbers exist to back me up. I don't know where I would begin to try and find them, but I do know that they're out there. Just a little bit of a lull in the action here as Shanghai decides how he wants to navigate this turn. He's actually going to go for the Inspiring Mentor. And Inspiring Mentor, another card that's just like a major throwback to the old Kinku elusive. So this is sort of a blast from the past matchup that I really didn't expect to see. Inspiring Mentor is something that these Freljord Ionia players are sort of making a return to. I don't know why I said Freljord Ionia instead of just elusives like a normal human being. But has the option for the Navori Conspirator play onto that sort of that old loop that they would go for back when the Inspiring Mentor was a 1/1 that gave it +1/+1. Now we've got Jeweled Protector as sort of that massive Inspiring Mentor. The Mentor now gets to come down onto, I would assume, the Jeweled Protector, as that is the one thing that sort of gets to come down and then trade onto the Garen as a 5/4 if you really wanted to. I don't think the 1 damage on the Windfarer Hatchling is going to matter quite as much. And we are just going to see the pass out of SDARO, still respecting the open mana and the possibility of the Fury of the North. And this could be that Judgment play I was talking about, but we do still have that Will of Ionia to shut everything down. We even see Cythria the Bold in this deck. I believe there was 1 Cythria and 3 Genevieve, so it's not like he just copy and pasted a Bannerman deck from 6 months ago and said, okay, this is what I'm going to play today. It has been updated a little bit at least. You know, as we see Grizzled Rangers in the deck. So, of course, it's been updated at least for Rising Tides, but you guys know what I mean. Shanghai not ultimately looking like he's in a bad spot. You know, this Fury of the North and this Will of Ionia get so much value in a matchup like this. Especially because this is like the old school Bannerman style out of SDARO rather than the aggressive version. Will of Ionia has a lot more sort of juicy targets. We might see it actually not only hit the best target in Garen, but also get the entire mana pool out of SDARO, and actually just going to go for a massive Z attack, getting 2 8/7s out, saying you must block this with Garen Fiora. And yet doesn't want to put the Garen in harm's way, but is going to have to. Judgment gets to come out here. That will at least level the Garen before it dies, as well as kill the Zed Shadow. Well, Zed Shadow is going to die anyway. That's how Ephemeral works. But I actually, you know, I was kind of curious how Shanghai was going to play this Fury of the North. It's a card that has a lot of potential in a matchup like this. It's a little bit weird in a situation like this only because... I mean, I guess you're just forcing the blocks, right? Like, that's what you're doing. You're fighting for board with this, and that is sort of the most effective tool that you're going to get out of it. You can't get the surprise lethal, but that's a little more unlikely. Just forcing your opponent to block with the Garen and the Fiora. I mean, it makes sense. It just, like, looks a little bit weird on paper, especially because we have perfect information, and we know that this is going to sort of result in a Judgment Will of Ionia anyway. I don't necessarily know that the Fiora block was going to come out, so you at least get that off the field. A little unfortunate that you don't get to kill the Garen, but because SDARO has no more setup for the turn, and you have 4 units to their 1, that does usually just spell out GG's here. We're actually just going to see the pass hanging on to that Elixir of Iron mana, leaving himself the capabilities for a defensive Windfarer Hatchling alongside that Elixir of Iron. And I think SDARO needed another Garen off the top to get that Judgment access back online to actually survive the next turn. So Shanghai looking to claw his way back into this series, and winning this game is a pretty good start to that. It's really the only start to that you could possibly have. You either win this game or you lose it, and if you lose, you're out of the semis. That is not a position you want to be in. Shanghai, a pretty predominant player in the Korean scene, I believe, was also invited to the Korean Invitational as well as that King of Runeterra tournament a little while back. So another one of those players just, you know, consistently performing, looking to pick up that first W in a Riot Korea sponsored event. Now we see Brightsteel Protector down onto the Fiora. This really doesn't do much. Gives you the option to take out the Zed. We are going to see that snuffed out by the Elixir of Iron. And I think Windfarer Hatchling is just lethal on the following turn, regardless of whether or not the Zed lives or dies. You just have enough elusive damage to kill your opponent with the Windfarer and the Navori Conspirator. I mean, yeah, you can play these Inspiring Mentors if you really want to. I don't think it makes too much of a difference. Or did I miss... Was I counting Windfarer Hatchling like it was going to buff itself? No, because it was... Yeah, it was buffed up by the... Yeah, by the boy. By the guy. So now, yeah, this is going to be 13 damage represented across the Windfarer Hatchling and the Navori Conspirator. That is just going to be lethal, as you would need to play Garen and Judgment in the same turn, which only works if you have 13 mana. SDARO only sitting on 10, not quite enough. It's just going to run out the Cytherea the Bold. It says, hey, remember this card? This card exists. We all thought this one should get nerfed after Bannerman did. But, you know, that is just going to be game number 3 here, going over to Shanghai. But this is a best of 5, so we still got 2 potential more games to bring you. And this one kind of just going the way that you would have expected it to. The old school Bannerman never really having a great elusive matchup. And Shanghai putting on full display why that might be. But also, you know, just having the Braum kind of take over a Demacia matchup as expected. Things playing out how we would really think they would here. Alright, SDARO now picking up that Bald Eagle deck. And Shanghai switching over to the Darius Harrowing. Now, SDARO is running a little bit of a atypical version of the Bald Eagle, as we also see Elise coming out of the deck of Shanghai, as well as the Draven and Darius, so just cutting down on one of those champions. Didn't actually get a chance to see which one, but SDARO is actually running a lot more ramp in the Bald Eagle deck than we typically see. Does have the full suite of Wording Stones, as well as a couple of copies of Catalyst of the Aeons. So we'll have to see how that one works out for him. Didn't open any of the ramp. Does have the Ruination to counter the Harrowing that we see in Shanghai's hand. But it's definitely a little bit harder for the Braum and Nivea deck to actually hold on to the mana to make sure that they have the Ruination lined up for the Harrowing turn. We'll have a little bit of extra time to get it done, as we don't see the attack token for 6 on Shanghai side. They're not going to have the attack until 7, so you do have that one extra turn to sort of bank up that mana to get the Ruination to counter it out. But with 2 early Legion Grenadiers coming down from Shanghai, the Harrowing's going to feel good even if you Ruination, and it still deals 4 damage to your opponent. And for 9 mana, getting a board wipe out of your opponent's hand, but also decimating them, feels really good. SDARO lining up a lot of early defenses, but still just taking, you know, 6 damage here by turn 3. This is why Darrowing is the boogeyman of the format. This is absolutely insane. Imagine just blocking every attack that comes out of your opponent and still just falling down this low early on. Basilisk Rider now going to come out, sort of the one answer for the Braum, and that's just going to be SDARO having to pass the turn. You can't get damage down onto the Braum to get the take hearts off. And there's no point to attack. I mean, you could attack into this, because you don't... Braum doesn't get the Poro unless he survives, so you can't even, like, attack into the Rider, have the Braum die, and then block it with the Poro on the following turn. And without Fury of the North in hand, SDARO doesn't have a great answer for this Basilisk Rider. And with only 7 mana available to him, doesn't even have a great answer for the Draven that we could see come down alongside this Basilisk Rider, at least just to open up the possibility of a transfusion. But SDARO, you know, might want to leave this Atrocity mana open. Shanghai might want to leave the Atrocity option on the table. Go for the open attack. If SDARO wants to throw out a Fury of the North, you just Atrocity at the face. Puts him below that 10 hold threshold down to 8 life, and it does mean all Darius is coming out will be leveled. As well as just sets you up for a nice little harrowing down the line. We are going to see the Draven, so not going to see the Atrocity come out. We're not going to see... Well, Fury of the North is still on the table for SDARO. We know he doesn't have it, but it is something that Shanghai does still have to be cognizant of. Draven's Axe not going to get anything done, but we do have the Transfusion if we see a block from the Braum, but that would mean that you're killing your Basilisk Rider. How do you want to play this one, Shanghai? How much do you value a Draven in a matchup like this? Especially, I mean, he doesn't know it, but we do see the Grasp of the Undying on SDARO's hand, so not going to have too much trouble dealing with that Draven if you do want to overcommit to saving it here, just to deny the Mighty Poro. You do have to be thinking about the possibility of a Ruination coming out over the course of the next couple of turns in order to deny your harrowing. It looks like we are going to value keeping the Draven alive. Just give your opponent something to deal with. It is not going to affect SDARO's capabilities of firing off a Ruination as a counter to this harrowing. I'm going to see Omen Hawk to play mana efficiently. Pretty likely to see a Nivea on the following turn. Could see Braum as well, though Braum could prompt double Spinning Axe, though I think SDARO would be very happy with that trade. I don't think you ever double Spinning Axe just to deny the Mighty Poro, especially given that Grasp of the Undying mana is still going to be available for the Bald Eagle player, who is just one short win away here from clutching this one out and taking himself to the semifinals. Shanghai, considering the possibilities for the turn, it's really just, do you want to run out a train of Demolitionists? And I feel like the answer is yes. Maybe not a bunch of Demolitionists, just because then you are opening yourself up to just die to this Braum, which is not what you want to do. But one Demolitionist feels okay. And SDARO, pretty likely to fire off the Grasp here. It is... So the problem with firing off the Grasp here, and it seemed like a snap decision in my head, but next turn is when we are... Ooh, this is scary. And the reason this is scary is because next turn, Shanghai has that harrowing available to him, and now SDARO does not have Ruination mana. So Shanghai probably going to be pretty happy with that one. Doesn't even necessarily want to play the Demolitionist anymore, as that just does take away from board space for the harrowing. We are going to see the Mighty Poro get popped out of this Braum, as well as the Omen Hawk push through 1 damage. So a fair amount of blockers on the side of SDARO, but you know, that's not necessarily going to be enough for all of the aggression coming out. And we see another harrowing off the top for Shanghai, which does mean that this lack of Ruination could actually play out for SDARO pretty well, as it does mean that he will have that Ruination available for the second one. And the second harrowing is usually a little bit scarier than the first, but even if SDARO were to somehow line up every block perfectly, he's still taking at minimum 5 damage from the Legion Saboteurs and the Grenadiers, as well as not having a phenomenal blocker for this Basilisk Rider. Is going to have to probably Fury of the North the Braum, but leveled Braum is a win condition in a matchup like this. You know, your opponent does have so many units coming out, you do get into that range where you can block onto things like the Iron Ballista a little bit more safely. I don't think there's anything that actually hits a 5-attack breakpoint that the leveled Braum specifically interacts with in a meaningful capacity. But SDARO, free to line up the blocks as he really wants to, does understand that Shanghai is down to 1 mana. Nothing else can really come out this turn. But it looks like SDARO is going to fall down to 5 life, 8 life actually. 8 life's not so bad, I guess. It's not great. You're losing pretty much your entire board here. It's a matter of, do you want to hang on to this Braum or this Kindly Tavern Keeper? Kindly Tavern Keeper gives you a better chance at proactively winning the game, which is something that you have to think about when you're against these aggro decks. Here we are going to see the Fury of the North popped off. And that does mean that SDARO is actually going to stay at a pretty healthy life. I said pretty healthy life total, but I actually meant 10 life. It feels healthy just because he has the Ruination for the second Harrowing, and the second Harrowing is going to summon currently, if everything plays out and nothing important dies over the course of the next couple turns, it'll be 2 Dravens, 2 Legion Grenadiers, and 2 Basilisk Riders. So that is still going to be 4 damage pushed through if the Ruination comes out. And we're actually going to see a Spinning Axe fired off here to trade onto the Tavern Keeper. Says you don't get to actually go for this proactive win. It's going to be Braum is the only thing that you're left with. No mana for Take Heart. Does mean that you only have 1 attack left on that thing. So I'm about 19 hits away from dead, and that's a situation where I'm feeling pretty good. Actually, the Mighty Pour are going to survive as well. Did miss that one on the attack lineup. So 4 damage. It's as much as the Tavern Keeper represented on its own, but would have loved to be pushing 8 damage instead of 4. And now a double Demolitionist on the side of Shanghai. And no matter how much mana SDARO spends this turn, does have the Ruination available on the following one. But we are just a Darius away from lethal thanks to this atrocity. And SDARO really only has that Ruination as a defensive tool at this point, and he needs to save that for the for the Harrowing. So did I say Ruin? Yeah, SDARO has Ruination for the Harrowing. I might have said that SDARO had a Harrowing. That's my bad. These cards are the 9 mana Shadow Isle spells. I get them a little bit confused. I do apologize for that. I know it's not. It can be a little grating on the ears. But both players probably feeling like they're not in a terrible position. I do think I want to favor Shanghai a little bit here, just in terms of the potential top deck outs that they have available to them. SDARO is really looking for probably a Vengeance in a situation like this, something to answer the Darius. You know, unfortunately for him, Shanghai can get off Darius and Atrocity in the same turn. And that could just be what we see come out here. Actually, the 3rd Harrowing out of Shanghai. And SDARO still only has that 1 Ruination. It does mean that the Egg Nivea is going to get to come out. That will live into the following turn. But so we're going to see Ruination fired off. That does mean that 4 damage is coming through at SDARO. And I think we just see a Demolitionist into another attack for 2. And that does mean that potentially we see lethal out of Shanghai on the following turn by Demolitionisting a Demolitionist and then Atrocitying a Demolitionist. SDARO does, like, there is a lot that SDARO could do to stop that, especially given that one of them is going to take 2 damage from the Sinivia. So the Demolitionist that is getting Demolitionist will only have 1 HP. It will kill it. So anything from Vile Feast to Withering Wail to Grasp of the Undying will stop that play. But unless SDARO top decks it next turn, that is going to be all she wrote. And SDARO might actually block with this Egg because he does have the Rekindler available to him. Rekindler into Anivia into the 2 damage. It does actually just represent exact lethal, given that Shanghai is at 9 life, so we know that's not going to work out. But it does critically prevent the double Demolitionist into Atrocity lethal, but Legion Grenadier is good enough. You know, you play the Grenadier, you Demolitionist the Grenadier, that's 4 damage, it's basically a Disciple, and then you still have that Atrocity lethal opened up to you. We're going to see the pass out of Shanghai. That does mean that the Vengeance is off the table for the turn, and this turn should just be lethal for Shanghai. You play the Grenadier, you block onto this Rekindler with it, that leaves you with a 1 health Demolitionist. You Demolitionist that, you put your opponent at 2, you throw out this Atrocity, and it is still a little bit scary. As I had mentioned, the Demolitionist that is getting demoed is going to be at 1 HP, so you do have to sort of consider the ramifications of a Vile Feast. Although I think at this point you just say that doesn't lose me the game because I just, you know, I have Harrowing on the following turn. I will survive. My opponent is going to be pretty much out of cards at that point. If their last 2 cards are Vile Feast, Ruination, then I'm pretty screwed, but SDARO, as we can see, doesn't have either of those. So this should just be Shanghai tying up the series, actually, 2-2. Not doing it as quickly as SDARO did in the first couple of games, but, you know, Shanghai took his time and got there in the long con. And that's one of the powers of this Darius Harrowing deck that I will continuously talk about, is how much power it has in the late game. Of course, drawing all 3 copies of Harrowing doesn't hurt your late game chances. But not finding the Darius that is sort of the namesake of the deck, so, you know, it's a trade-off. You find all 3 Harrowing, you don't find any Darius, it's fine. And actually, we saw SDARO just choose not to attack that turn, which I'm kind of curious how he planned to win the game if he's just not attacking anymore ever again. And we could just see the atrocity on the Grenadier here. Like I said, that does get blown out by Vile Feast, but you have the Harrowing on the following turn anyway, so maybe you don't care too much. The Harrowing currently should be reviving 4 Basilisk Riders and 2 Dravens, so you're not getting any Grenadiers. And there we do see the Vile Feast off the top, but we also see the Noxian Fervor off the top for Shanghai, and that is definitely going to be all she wrote. Yeah, that's 3 Basilisk Riders coming out there, SDARO. That is not a horse that you are able to tame. That one's just going to trample over you for victory. There are no more Shadow Isle cards in... Or sorry, there's one Elise left in Shanghai's deck, so he could have missed Allegiance there, theoretically. You know, once that one Atrocity and 3 Harrowing were out, I was like, oh yeah, there's no more Shadow Isle cards, but he is running that one of Elise, so that did not come to bite him in the ass here. He does still get Overwhelm onto all of his Basilisk Riders, and doesn't even need to play the Noxian Fervor or Atrocity, never needs to let SDARO know that those were there. He can check the VODs later, but he won't find out today how close he was to losing in every single way, and that is just going to be lethal. I don't think there's any blocks that you can line up here. The triple Basilisk Rider is a bit too much to deal with, on top of this Noxian Fervor that we have, as well as the Spinning Axe. 1 mana shy of playing the Vengeance and the Vile Feast, but even if you could play them both, doesn't actually make too much of a difference here in the long run, thanks to the cards available to Shanghai, and that does mean that we are tied up 2-2. We are getting a Game 5, and since we haven't seen PZ Ionia out of either of these players, I haven't sort of seen their lineups, but I would assume that that means game number 5 is going to be a Heimer Vi or Karma Ezreal type matchup. I'm not sure who brought Heimer Vi, who brought Karma Ezreal. Maybe one of these players didn't bring PZ Ionia at all, but you know, I think that would be a little wild. I think everybody... All 16 combatants did bring some kind of PZ Ionia. I'll have to check into that a little bit later, but that is, I feel like that's not a bold prediction to have. So we're going to be getting into some action here in a minute. That's going to be another slow and grindy one. So stick around, buckle up. We should be in this one for the long haul as Shanghai ties this series up to a Game 5 for a PZ Ionia mirror, I think. You'll find out in 10 seconds. It's going to be a little bit longer for me. Did I call it or did I call it? We've got a Heimer Vi mirror on our hands. Both players even opening with the Heimerdinger and a Twin Discipline. So boy, oh boy, are we in this one for the long haul. Both players getting sort of that ideal turn 5 Heimer along with the protection. We actually see pretty similar opening hands out of both players. They've got the Shadow Assassin, the Heimer, and that Twin Disciplines, as well as the Thermo Beam. So, you know, second Twin Discipline and Concussive Palm sort of the only differences here. Didn't notice any major differences between the decks. We actually do see SDARO with that 1 copy of Karma instead of the third Vi, and I do like that a lot. Not only because, you know, you don't need Vi in every matchup. Multiple copies of Vi can kind of clunk up in your hand, especially because the Heimer Vi is a deck that can play Protect the Vi pretty well. It's possible that you throw out that first Vi, you throw a lot of protection spells onto it, and then it dies in your second Vi. You know, it's not a bad card, but it could be a Karma. And the other thing that I really like about the Karma, specifically in the Heimer Vi as opposed to sort of the Karma Ezreal, is that we see Ezreal's cutting down a lot on Get Excited. Most players are only running about 1 copy. Sometimes we'll see 2. Heimerdinger loves Get Excited. It's always going to play that 3 copies because it represents a 3-mana spell. And Karma, Enlightened Karma, with double Get Excited, double Mystic Shot, is 20 damage. And it's not often that you're going to find yourself in a situation where you've got, you know, 2 Get Exciteds and 2 Mystic Shots in your hand, as well as a leveled Karma on field. And you do have to untap with the leveled Karma because it's too much mana. Otherwise, it is 10 mana to throw out those Mystic Shots and Get Exciteds in that, you know, sort of capacity. But it is something that we could see happen. And it is a situation that I like that you can put yourself in, as well as just if you are both sitting here in a Heimer Vi mirror and you both have Heimers down on the field, and then suddenly one player throws out a Karma and is getting twice as many turrets, that's really impactful, especially if it's that player's attack turn. They get to trade into the board with you, then fill up with twice as many units. There is board space restrictions that you're going to have to play into, but there's also not a whole lot of removal for the Karma, as well as there's just a lot of protection for the Karma. There's a reason that we saw Karma Heimerdinger before Vi sort of came out in the Rising Tide set. And now both players just actually a pass over from Shanghai, even though he had double Shadow Assassin and the attack token, not wanting to offer up that trade for some reason. Do see him pick up the 3rd Shadow Assassin even, so just a lot of draw power on the side of Shanghai. And now both players sitting pretty on this turn 5 Heimer turn. Do have the Twin Disciplines available to both of them. Do have the Thermo Beams if someone throws down a Heimer. You know, you get to throw that out, and both players sort of respecting that, understanding that they need the Deny or Spirit's Refuge capabilities to protect themselves from the thermogenic beam. Though neither player with the Deny, we do see the Spirit's Refuge on the side of Shanghai. And neither player sitting at 10 cards in hand, so no one's like forced to make a move. Here we are going to see the Vi come down from Shanghai. And given that it is SDARO's attack turn, he can throw down the Heimer if he wants. Does have the Twin Disciplines to protect it. Thermogenic Beam now off the table. You do have the Concussive Palm to stop the Vi next turn as well to protect the Heimer. And maybe SDARO just, you know, is inclined to throw down this Heimer here and untap with it. I'm not going to lie. It's been quite some time since I played a Heimer Vimir. And actually, it looks like we are just going to get the Thermo Beam onto the Vi, giving a lot of respect over to Piltover's finest. I'm not sure that this is better than the Heimerdinger, but it is the play that SDARO is going to go with. You know, maybe everybody else in the comments is like, that is the most obvious. Like, you always Thermo Beam the Vi there. Like I said, been a while since I played the matchup. Been a while since I saw this matchup played. Most players going with the Karma Ezreal nowadays over the Heimer Vi. So even if we are in a scenario where both players are forced to play their PZI, typically we're seeing Karma Ezreal mirrors. Those ones I can talk about, but Heimer Vi's mirrors, it has been quite some time for me, I must admit. And this does mean that Shanghai is safer to get down the Heimerdinger on this turn. SDARO not able to play his with only 1 mana to back it up. And Shanghai should be in a more advantageous position here. Does get to untap with the Heimer already on field. And this is sort of the misstep that can cost SDARO the entire game. I am over-dramatizing that one a little bit, but not by a whole lot. We are going to see Flash of Brilliance now out of both players. No Deep Meditation out of anyone to get reduced cost on by that. Oh, a Progress Day out of SDARO, his Flash of Brilliance. Ritual Renewal is good, but baby, it's no Progress Day. And it doesn't look like SDARO is actually really going to get punished for running out that Heimer a turn late. There's not a whole lot that Shanghai has in their hand to actually go for this. Like, you can Will of Ionia the Heimer, and that's probably about as good as it gets. Will of Ionia gets a fair amount of value in a matchup like this, just because the turrets do reset to full cost when you Will of Ionia them. It's also a pretty good tempo play, and maybe we're just throwing out the Static Shock first because we do want to kill this 3-1 turret. We want to see how our opponent is going to respond, and we can just Will of Ionia the Heimer if they play any spell in response. So I'm curious as to what Shanghai thought SDARO would throw out. You know, you might as well just push the damage onto the Heimer, open it up for a potential Mystic Shot or something along those lines. And you want to get that Fearsome turret down, which is unblockable for the turn. SDARO considering a Mystic Shot, but realizes that that opens him up to a Thermogenic Beam. Currently sort of bluffing a Deny or a Spirit's Refuge. And I think it might behoove Shanghai to just fire off the Thermo Beam onto this opposing Heimerdinger anyway. You know, if your opponent responds with Get Excited, that's about worst case scenario. You don't get your 6-mana turret, your opponent gets a 3-mana turret, you both lose your Heimers. Yeah, that actually sounds pretty bad. So we're not going to see that as the play out of Shanghai. But the more I thought it out, the more I was like, yeah, you don't do that. You never do that, right? But now Shanghai has Carmen, or Vi number 2 available to him, is going to run that one out. Has the full board advantage, and SDARO looking like they're in a little bit of trouble here. Can't even fire off something like a Progress Day to get the TX. That will overdraw you to Kingdom Come. And even this Static Shock is going to overdraw him. He's not going to get the turret off of this because the draw should happen first from the Static Shock. But you don't want to just fire off a Twin Disciplines randomly. It's not going to feel great, but that is sort of the situation that you're in. I'm curious if this is a mistake from SDARO or if it's calculated, understanding that the turret really doesn't matter that much here. The rest of his turn is pretty committed to concussive palming this Vi. So I think I actually would have liked to see the concussive palm come out first. And you can always Static Shock in combat. But SDARO wants to see what he draws. I can't blame him for that one. Will of Ionia is sort of the best bet for getting this Vi off the field and dealing with it tempo-wise. Concussive Palm's cool, but it doesn't make your opponent pay 5 mana again. And if we do see Concussive Palm, we could actually see a kill onto the Heimer. But the precarious situation that Shanghai finds himself in is that if he ever fires off Thermogenic Beam onto Staro's Heimer, he opens himself up to just get excited right back onto his own Heimer. So the player's just kind of handshaking how the Heimerdingers are working out in this matchup. And Shanghai, once again, just like 1 mana short of the play that he wants to make. He would love to Will of Ionia your opponent's Heimer and then have Twin Disciplines back up to blow out the Get Excited, but just doesn't have that. And 2 Claws of the Dragon going to pop out of the hand now of SDARO. Does get this turret for the Concussive Palm. And Shanghai might as well run out this Shadow Assassin, right? He's still got 9 cards in hand, so he's not going to overdraw on the following turn. You've got 3 real mana that you might as well spend. And without a Get Excited of his own... So what Shanghai could do here, and this would be kind of weird and a little heads up, is you Twin Disciplines your Heimerdinger up to a 1/6 and then Thermogenic Beam your opponent. No, because if you do that, then your opponent just has Twin Discipline on their own. Like, you need a 6 mana Thermo Beam to kill the Heimer. And it looks like he is actually going to go for the Twin Discipline Thermo Beam, force an answer out of his opponent. And as I was talking about this play, I kind of realized how much I didn't love this play, actually. I mean, it's not bad. You know, this is about as much value as your Thermo Beam is going to get. We were talking about how it's really scary for him to go for it. It would be like a 9 mana play to try and protect your Heimer and Thermo Beam your opponents. But because we saw double Twin Discipline out of SDARO, we know that it wouldn't really matter anyway. We are going to see the Twin Discipline to protect it. I believe this is going to level both players' Heimers, or it will level Shanghai's Heimer. I think SDARO's is maybe 2 off. I think we've seen 2 elusive turrets and 1 fearsome, so that might be sitting at 10 out of 12. So the next instance of a turret coming down will level that Heimer for SDARO, put him back on the even playing field. And the Heimer top deck out of Shanghai means both players have Progress Day available to them. Both players have 9 mana. Both players have a lot of units on board. We're looking at a mirror match if I've ever seen one. SDARO looking for that Karma to sort of be the difference maker in a matchup like this. You know, does still have 1 Mystic Shot and 1 Get Excited available to him if he can find that Karma off the Progress Day, or just fire off the Progress Day in general. You know, he's actually got a pretty good shot of going for that 20 damage lethal that I was talking about a little bit earlier on in the game here. And one of the big things that the Karma nerf to 6 mana did impact, as we see this triple Will of Ionia out of Shanghai's hand, is that you can't play a Karma and then replay her in the same turn. Previously, it was really awkward for your opponent. If you're on turn 10, you play a Karma, it levels, they will it, you replay it. That's no longer an option because she is 6 mana. So that's sort of one of the big things that you have to think about in a nerf like that, especially when its mana cost is going from 5 to something else, is can I play it twice in a turn if it gets Will of Ionia? In case of Karma, the answer is no, which honestly I think is fine. Karma is a very, very strong champion. And when all is said and done, we see a very strong Vi as the champion on the side of Shanghai. Both players left with their Heimerdingers. A lot of spells in hand and a lot of mana. The Mexican standoff continues as Shanghai is just going to pro pass over to SDARO. Give him the option to just kind of take this trade. See the Mystic Shot onto the Vi that would drop her down to 1 HP. Gonna need to Get Excited if you want to kill her, buckaroo. Mystic Shot would give you that missing 2 health turret to level the Heimer. And leveling the Heimer is actually pretty big in a matchup like this. Simply because there are Get Exciteds coming out of both players. Getting to that 4 health breakpoint as opposed to 3 is pretty important. And Shanghai might be inclined to fire off a Will of Ionia onto the Heimerdinger here out of SDARO, just to sort of reset the turret count on it and stop it from leveling. Or he could fire off a Progress Day. Progress Day is a little scary. That does open you up to the Thermo Beam that we do see in SDARO's hand, so Will of Ionia seems a little bit more likely. And this could be where we see our first fight for cards. The Deny going to come out onto the Will of Ionia. Does Shanghai now want to commit the second Will of Ionia? There's only going to be 3 mana left for SDARO, so I do actually think this behooves Shanghai to go for, as there's nothing for 3 mana that's going to kill his Heimerdinger. Yeah, it does go for the Will of Ionia, preventing 2 turrets, resetting that pivotally. And yeah, we're just going to see SDARO no longer has the mana to actually play the Heimer this turn. So we are going to see a little bit more mana floated to the side of SDARO for the turn. But that does mean that Shanghai once again gets to untap with the Heimerdinger. We didn't see it matter too much earlier on. I think the difference was he got to level his Heimer first. And that could be the slight advantage that he needs. The problem is that the turrets don't get a significant enough health buff to matter in the trading process. But we are actually going to see 3-mana Thermo Beam to take out the Vi before she can level. And going into Shanghai's attack turn. If we go for an open attack, you are just trading this turret for the Tails of the Dragon. I'm trying to think of how many Thermo Beams we've seen out of SDARO so far and how likely it is to see a Progress Day out of Shanghai. Shanghai does have the mana to play Progress Day and Twin Discipline, so I think if you're going to fire it off, this is like... It's not the safest turn you could do it on, but it's not risky either. And we actually do see the Progress Day. We're going to get Thermo Beam, Flash of Brilliance, Solitary Monk. Solitary Monk's pretty useless at this juncture. You know, one of the cards that I never loved to put into a deck, especially a combo-based one like the Heimer Vi or the Karma Ezreal. Especially the Heimer Vi, where like once you're popping off with the Heimer, especially in a mirror match like this where things are pretty close and it's a very grindy resource battle, it really sucks to draw this card that you're never going to get an opportunity to play. Even if the Heimer dies, it's pretty likely that you're still going to have turrets alive. Here we see the Flash of Brilliance now out of Shanghai. SDARO really on the back foot here. Might even just have to throw out the Get Excited to get his own elusive. But he doesn't have... things are a little bit scary here. Only a little bit. The Mystic Shot does make things a little bit scarier. It does sort of... So I don't love this, just because I think this takes... the Heimer blocking the T-Hex off the table, because you don't only have 1 mana left. If you still had the 3 mana, you could block the T-Hex and then throw out Twin Disciplines on whatever your opponent did for the 4 mana. I think we might actually just see a Will of Ionia onto the Heimerdinger again. That is going to be the case. Deny that 2 health turret. Get that, you know, sort of little blocker out of here. Another fearsome turret for Shanghai. And hold on, let me do some math here, because I think it actually behooves you to attack with the... Oh, is this just lethal with the 0-mana Challenger turret? I was trying to figure out if he should attack with Heimerdinger, because if your opponent blocks that, you're still pushing through 17 damage. But is actually just going to get this Challenger, and that is 19 damage. That is lethal found by Shanghai. Clawing this one back from the jaws of defeat, getting that reverse sweep onto SDARO, and Shanghai's moving on to the semifinals.